Hornets fired James Borrego. Turns out it was Borrego. Just
head. The article was spot on. Everybody can hate on me. A lot of my friends backed Borrego, and they were like, "Oh, like this article is blah blah blah, whatever." If you read the article, it was pretty spot on what I said, and everybody's like, "Why did they fire him this soon? Like Michael Jordan has to have a plan." Borrego improved 10 wins one year, and then 10 more wins this year to get 43. Let's put that in perspective, because I talked about this last time we talked about this topic. 23 wins to 33 wins. Both of those seasons were shortened. 65 games, 72 games. So the improvement is not as drastic as you may think. There's really been a steady decline since his first year there, and then a little bit of improvement this year. 43 wins, that's great. That's awesome. You don't get paid for winning regular season games. You get paid for winning in the playoffs, producing results. I'm not taking anything away from his development of young players, but it was the right decision. The fact of the matter is the Hornets were 2 or 3 years ahead of the rebuild schedule. Like, that's great, and he contributed to that. But the fact of the matter is that they were ahead of the schedule, so they need to win now. Maybe not win an NBA championship, obviously, but not get blown out 2 years in a row, fall to the 10 seed 2 years in a row, lose by 30 points each time in the playing game. You would think the second year they would at least know since they've been there. It was time for him to go. James Borrego, last thing I'll say about this for now, Borrego was the guy for the Hornets rebuild. He developed the talent, did a great job of that, built the team, whatever it may be. Had great relationships with the players, apparently, but he wasn't that guy to take them to the next level, whether it be lack of experience, lack of whatever, like lack of rotational awareness, lack of defensive schemes, whatever it may be. He just wasn't that guy to take them to the next level. And he did have opportunities in win or go home games. I think if he wins one of those playing games and the Hornets get into the playoffs, he probably gets another year.
I think so too. I think another thing that's underrated in this is that I think his voice got stale.
What do you mean?
I think they just got tired of hearing the same message and not a different result.
And I was about to say, and it wasn't working. Exactly. Those defensive rotations that sometimes were maddening. And I'm not saying Kelly Oubre is a star defender and people like that, but some of the rotations, you just can't run against NBA caliber teams. Nobody else does it. And there's a reason nobody else does it.
Okay. What do you say to the people who say, okay, he's never had a real center in his time in Charlotte?
That's fine and dandy. I agree with that. And that's one glaring issue that you can point to, is that the roster construction wasn't there. But then again, it never is. Like, a no NBA roster is really perfect. It's like, as a coach, you have to make do with what you can. I mean, Mason Plumlee is not horrible. He's not a starting caliber center, but there's enough other talent around them. I feel like they weren't the 10th best talented team in the East. I think they were higher than that.
And then what do you say to people that say, okay, well, Gordon Hayward, he doesn't have his full team because Gordon Hayward's always out?
That's also fair. That's a fair point. But then again, if you're the Hornets, then whatever it just is not working. I feel like Hayward has to be gone also. At least, like, what do you think? Like, I feel like Hayward
you have to figure out something. I mentioned this when I did the podcast on Friday. It sounds crazy because I hate Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert fits in Charlotte better than any other team in the NBA right now.
That lob threat for LaMelo, the defensive presence is on the block. Obviously gets exposed in the playoffs. At least he would get us there, Exactly. As that may be. And just the whole Borrego thing, it's like, if he comes back for another year, like if they gave him one more year and the same thing happened again, then you're really risking like the players like getting used to that losing mentality, that losing culture, same thing over and over again. Maybe somebody leaving, like it's just so risky. I feel like it was the right time for a change. I really do. I thought they would give him at least maybe like half of next year to see what happened, but I don't hate this move at all. I called for it in the article. I think it is time to move on.
That's another thing too, is who do we hire now? Who do the Hornets hire now? There's a Mark Jackson rumors, Mike D'Antoni. You've seen a zillion names. Quinn Snyder, if the Jazz get knocked out early, even though if I'm Utah, Utah is kind of in the same situation, even though they've been way better than the Hornets have in the previous years. They're in a situation where they may have to fire Quinn Snyder because his voice is getting old, and they got to keep Donovan Mitchell happy.
That, and they've had just like the Hornets, obviously the Jazz's ceiling is higher. They've had the same ceiling for the last 3-4 years.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. So that's the thing. Like, they're consistently making the playoffs, but the whole goal is to win a championship. And so if you're not getting there and it's clearly not working, you do have to change something up. Even if you're like a top 5-6 team in the West still. And I wouldn't be mad at Quinn Snyder, or I would be mad at Mark Jackson. D'Antoni, I think, would be fine.
Mark Jackson would be horrendous. Mark Jackson would be an all-time blunder. What about Coach K? What about Coach K?
What about it? I don't. Oh God, that would be rough for me. I would have to. I mean, I'm a diehard Hornets fan. I would have to just roll with it. It's the same thing as like, golly, I don't know. Like the Hornets draft Mark Williams or something like, or Jeremy Sochan. Like, as a Carolina fan, that's tough, but I would roll with it. Coach K is like a new level. Like, if that somehow happened, I don't know how I'd react.
Yeah, and the last thing we'll talk about with Borrego is people say like the whole center situation, Gordon Hayward, all that. This Hornets team is way too talented not to be playing in the playoffs. The matter of the fact that the Raptors are in the playoffs right now, the Cavs were a 7 seed. They easily could have made the playoffs if they would just if they were decent. If Jared Allen was healthy, they were making the playoffs. Yeah. Like those teams were making the playoffs, and I don't believe they're more talented than the Hornets.
And here's the thing. I know the Pelicans are making a lot of noise right now because Booker's out and everything. I think the Hornets have a better roster than them without Zion, at least, because they haven't had Zion the whole year. And they've won 2 games in the playoffs against the number 1 seed. You're telling me the Hornets aren't better than the Pelicans, don't have a better roster? At least pretty close to the same.
Willie Green, a home run higher for the Pelicans.
Yeah, that was money. Like, if the Hornets could find somebody like that, like, I don't know. Like, do you think the Hornets need like an established head coach that's been in the playoffs before, that's maybe been out of the league for a couple of years, or another assistant
that
getting their first crack in?
I think it's got to be a veteran, right? It's got to be a D'Antoni. It's got to be a Quinn Snyder. Maybe not someone that's won a championship, but someone who's been to the playoffs and does that kind of thing and has worked with superstars.
Frank Vogel?
Another thing. Borrego's working with LaMelo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Frank Vogel would be a fine hire. I genuinely think he might be the next Charlotte head coach. He seems like he would be it.
Yeah, I don't hate that at all. And that's the thing. You hit the nail on the head. If they go with another assistant coach or something like that, that's more of the same. Then I don't understand why they fired James Borrego if they follow that path again. I completely disagree with that. So it has to be somebody established that's had head coaching experience and hopefully playoff experience.
Yeah, and a lot of people are mentioning the assistant on the Milwaukee Bucks and stuff like that.
Oh, Darvin Ham?
Yeah.
I feel like he'll be a great head coach, but that's not what the Hornets need in particular.
No.
Not with the roster.
That's someone like the Pistons or the Magic need.
Exactly.
Get those teams off the ground, or like when the Wizards finally go through their complete teardown when Bradley Beal leaves in a few years.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. It's just not what the Hornets need with their current roster construction. Now, if you asked me this question 3 years ago, then sure. But they did that with Borrego, took that path, worked out fairly well, but it is time to move on and hopefully get somebody that's established in the league.
Last thing on the Hornets, we'll do 2 more things on the Hornets. First off, we talked about it a little bit. What do we do with Hayward and how do we fix this roster going forward? Do we pay Miles Bridges, that whole thing?
I think number one, it's like the whole thing about making the 10 seed and then getting blown out twice in a row. Hayward once again went out in late February, I think it was, missed the last month and a half, 2 months of the year, questionably coming back, came back for 15 minutes in the Philly game and then missed the rest of the year again, just like last year. I feel like something has to be done about it. Like, I don't know like what the best move is with that. Like, I know it's a huge salary. People have said Russell Westbrook. I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't know if another team would have to match that salary, but the Hornets do have to figure something out with him because it can't be the same thing over and over again. Your highest paid player can't miss the last 3 months of the year, the most crucial stretch.
Yep, exactly.
All right. I think something has to be done.
The absolute last thing on the Hornets, just real quick, who do you think they draft going in? If they don't trade for a center, I'll go first. I think Mark Williams to the Hornets is almost a lock.
See, I think Mark Williams is ahead of Kai Jones when he came out of college, but I feel like that's more of the same. I feel like they would treat him the same they've treated Kai Jones.
Maybe not with a new coach, though.
Maybe
I think
not,
that's just Borrego's way.
I guess so, but we've had Vernon Carey, Nick Richards, Kai Jones, and now like Mark Williams. Like, I feel like that's more of the same. But drafting a center for us hasn't worked.
I just think that's Borrego's regime because LaMelo was on the bench most of his rookie year.
That is a fair point. That is a fair point. But
James Bouknight was getting blackmailed, it seemed like, this year.
I feel like Bouknight would have been gone if Borrego stayed. Call me crazy.
The lowest player in the league to request a trade to do a storm out in the offseason.
That would be crazy. But I just feel like the Hornets have not had success drafting centers.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't, but we don't know because Borrego doesn't even try it. Like Nick Richards was never going to work. I mean,
no, that was a reach. And Vernon Carey, we thought had potential ACC Player of the Year. Not really
even
built
that.
in the NBA.
Just defensively, he's just not there. Kai Jones is a little raw, but I think he's there. Like if you watch the Greensboro Swarm games, he is dominant.